Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, the live Q&A portion of our virtual forum series on climate adaptation in megacities, insights learned in Hong Kong for all cities. This has been a 5-week series, so if you have not yet watched the first 5 weeks, I would encourage you to do so first, as today's webinar is actually a live Q&A follow-up to those 5 series. Today's webinar is being hosted in part by the International Association for Impact Assessment, or IAIA, and it's also being hosted by the Hong Kong Institute of Environmental Impact Assessment and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. My name is Keisha Blaser. I will be facilitating today's webinar, though you will mainly be hearing from our presenters who you'll meet in just a moment. If at any point during the webinar you hear something that you would like to share with your networks, I would encourage you to do so. You can see our hashtag there, IAIA webinar, as well as our handle for Twitter or X that you can use, so at IAI Network. Before we get started, I would encourage you to go to www.iaia.org to see the different resources and events we have there. So first off, you'll see a variety of different webinars on demand, which are the recordings of our previous live webinars. There are just a few there on the screen for you. For example, we have Human Rights Due Diligence and the Environment, which was about integrating environmental considerations into human rights due diligence based on UN guiding principles, as well as a recent webinar we had on psychosocial impact assessment, which covered the field of PSIA, focusing on how it helps identify and characterize cultural and mental health impacts in communities affected by proposed developments. However, like I said, those are just a couple of examples, but we have webinars on biodiversity, resettlement, and more, so please go check those out. Next up, I would like to point your attention to our upcoming events. So first and foremost, we have our IAIA 25 annual conference happening this year in Bologna, Italy on the 1st through 4th of May. Registration is now open and is open until 10th of April, so I would encourage you to go check that out. In addition to the main conference, we have a variety of training courses happening ahead of time, as well as technical visits that you can register for in addition to the conference. No matter what your sector is, there is something for you with over 100 different sessions proposed. Next up, we also have a couple of webinars coming up. So first, on the 9th of December, we have a webinar on considering ENS impacts related to green hydrogen, as well as a webinar on the 14th of January on sustainability and the circular economy in Latin America. Next up, in addition to our webinars, we also have a variety of online training and mentorship through our professional development program. At this time, registration is open for our 2 different courses. First, we have a course on the Foundations of Impact Assessment, which focuses primarily on environmental impact assessment. That course will start in January and run through April, and as I said, registration is open now. And additionally, we also have our newer course on social impact assessment, which will start in February and run through April as well. Like I said, registration is open for both of those courses, and you can find more information on www.iaia.org. Lastly, there are also a variety of free downloadable publications, like our best practice principles, or if you want something more short and sweet, we also have our IA Fast Tips. Now, a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. Yes, today's webinar will be recorded, so if you are not able to join us live, or if you are joining us live and would like to be able to watch this again or send to somebody else, the live recording will be sent to you within a day or 2 of the live broadcast, and it will be available on our website. However, I will note that this entire virtual forum, the 5-week series plus this Q&A, is only going to be available on our website until the end of January, so be sure to watch it soon before you lose access. Next up, the majority of today's webinar is going to be a Q&A with our panelists, but don't feel like you have to wait until the Q&A starts to put your questions in. In fact, if you have questions now, go ahead and go to the Questions tab on the control panel and type your question in there. The panelists will then flag them, and hopefully we have time to answer all of your questions during the Q&A portion. Any slides that we use today during the webinar are also available under the Handouts tab on the control panel, and they will be included in the email with the live recording. Now, to get started, I'd like to introduce the facilitator and a couple of the speakers for today's webinar, but there will be more that I am not introducing now. First off, the facilitator is Kathy Ip, and a few of the speakers that you'll hear from momentarily are David Gallagher, Wes Fisher, Yo-Yo Mock, and Crystal Louie. So with that, over to you.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm David Gallagher, the chair of the Hong Kong Institute of IAIA. Based here in Hong Kong, I'm with my colleagues Kathy, Crystal, and Yo-Yo. and we'd like to welcome you to this final session of the virtual forum on climate adaptation in megacities. So over the past few weeks, we've had a chance to share some perspectives on climate adaptation in urban environments with you. And here in Hong Kong, because of our coastal location in the subtropics, we're very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, including higher temperatures, sea level rise, and increased severity of storms and typhoons. And this is particularly the case given the high population density and complex infrastructure of our city. So given the potential scale of impacts, we have experts from various sectors contributing to improved climate resilience across the city. And impact assessment is a critical tool in the fight against climate change, as it helps us to identify and prioritize the most significant risks. By analyzing the likelihood and severity of various climate hazards, exposure, as well as the vulnerability of different communities and sectors, impact assessment provides a foundation for developing targeted adaptation measures. They also help decision makers allocate resources effectively and ensure that adaptation efforts are equitable and responsive to the needs of the most vulnerable populations. So the lessons, experiences, and skills learned from climate adaptation efforts in megacities such as Hong Kong can offer a blueprint for effectively addressing climate risks in smaller cities. Megacities, often at the forefront of innovation and policy implementation, have developed more comprehensive strategies that encompass advanced infrastructure, community engagement, and policy integration. These strategies can be scaled down and tailored to a unique set of circumstances in smaller cities, enabling them to adapt proven solutions such as green infrastructure, early warning systems, and resilient urban planning. By learning from the successes and challenges faced by larger urban areas, smaller cities can expedite their own climate adaptation processes, ensuring they are better prepared to protect their communities' environments from the growing impacts of climate change. These strategies have been comprehensively covered in the previous sessions of this forum, including climate adaptation policy and infrastructure resilience, severe weather events and early warning systems, coastal resilience and water resource management strategies, urban heat stress, nature-based solutions, climate risk planning, and ESG impacts for the private sector. So in this final session of the forum, this is a live Q&A event, allowing you, the participants, to engage with the speakers, discuss collaborative opportunities, and outline actionable steps for enhancing climate resilience and adaptation initiatives in megacities. So before we move on with the discussion, I'd just like to offer our sincerest gratitude to all of the speakers who have contributed their time, experience, and knowledge to make this virtual forum possible. I'd also like to thank IAIA for hosting and collaborating on this initiative, in particular, Gary Baker and Wes Fisher. And finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues at IAIA and the Chinese University of Hong Kong, who worked very hard to make this event a success, especially Casey Lam and Yuan Xu. So welcome all again, and we look forward to some interesting questions and discussion in this session. I'll now pass over to my colleague Kathy to facilitate the overall session.
Okay. Thank you so much, our Chairman David, for a brief introduction of this whole series, and also welcome all of us for joining tonight, this morning, for this live session of this virtual forum. This is final session where we all sit here with our panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, first of all, our first panelist, Dr. David Gallagher, who is also the speaker of nature-based solution of our week 4 video. And also, I'd like to invite Professor Casey Lam and also Professor Xu Yuan to open your camera and speaker to join us. They're from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, who have helped a lot to contribute to this virtual forum as well. And while they're turning on their camera and microphone, I'd like to also proudly introduce the two young ladies next to me, which is Yo-Yo Mac and also Crystal Lui. They are the young and bright future of Hong Kong. And tonight, with all our 5 panelists, as well as myself, we will talk about, from Hong Kong's point of view, how megacities are coping with climate adaptations. And also, thank you for our participants for chipping in all these questions, both when you register. We will tackle it one by one tonight. Also, if you, just like what Keisha said, you don't have to wait until we answer all those questions before you can put in questions. So please feel free to put in your questions into the chat so that we can discuss thoroughly. To start with, as mentioned by our first and foremost speaker, our Secretary for Environment and Ecology of Hong Kong, at the beginning, Hong Kong has been closely following the Climate Action Plan 2050 with a view to achieving carbon neutrality for before 2050. How do you see young professionals? I would like to start with Crystal and Yo-Yo. How do you see young professionals could contribute to the four sectors mentioned by our secretary? Can I start with Yo-Yo?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things mentioned by the secretary, I remember he really emphasized that on the training part to the young professional. So I think like with the education and capacity building kind of thing, just like what we are doing now actually,
Right.
I think it would be like a really important channel for us as young people to know more about like climate change and what we can help and what we can contribute to Hong Kong, especially in the way that we are developing our professional career, you know. So I think having this kind of training or any kind of support, like in Hong Kong, we do have a fund which was called like Green Talent Fund, which actually provides some kinds of like monetary incentive for us young people to be enrolled in certain courses, like to be trained in particularly like green finance or sustainability, or even if you're interested in carbon, you can take some courses about it, and the government will pay for us. So I think this kind of initiative is really important for us young people to get better prepared for ourselves, to help to give a helping hand to tackle the problem of climate change that we're facing, especially in Hong Kong and the megacity. So I think with this kind of like training support and provided by the government and the institute ourselves, it would really help us to be more prepared and to provide a helping hand towards carbon neutrality in Hong Kong.
Thanks, Yo-Yo. And I totally agree that from funding of Hong Kong, we not only train the professionals, the young professionals for Hong Kong ourselves, we also can share like at this platform provided by IAIA to extend our impact to the world. And what about Crystal? What do you think from young professionals?
I guess Yo-Yo has already give us the perfect answer of that. I just want to maybe promote a bit about like Hong Kong. Recently, we have HKIP. They have already been like legally acknowledged by the government that it will be like after you pass the exam, then you will be qualified. And then also like HKIA, they provide all of the like training sessions, all kind of talks. They invite a lot of guest speakers from the environmental protection department or all the experts from the industry. So we can always learn a lot of new things, new trends, and then follow up all the innovations, things, new technologies, things like that.
Thank you. And speaking of education and passing on to the next generation, we actually have a question from one of our participants about environmental education and how it can lead to a better climate adaptation. Can I pass this question to Professor Yoon to tell us more about it from Hong Kong context and global context? Hello? Oh, yes.
Hello, sorry.
We hear you.
Okay, so what was the question again? Sorry, I was sending a message to Casey.
Sorry, the message, the question was how environmental education can actually help megacities to adapt to climate change.
Oh, it's very important because I'm a professor here in the China University of Hong Kong. So we train a lot of students at different levels. We think that education really played a huge role to introduce this new students into this field. We can find that especially on climate change, from mitigation to adaptation, the major topic we have today. So it's, the students are coming from different levels, different tracks. So we can give them an entry point into this, and then so we can pass it on to the society to lay down for later training. so that we can really have this collaboration to train new generations of young professionals, and so they can continue working on climate change to make sure that we have a bright future together.
Thank you, Professor Yun. And also we have Professor Casey Lam here. Can I invite Professor Lam to unmute himself later while we discuss on other topics? So thanks to all the panelists for sharing the Hong Kong examples. And just like our week 3 speaker from Civil Engineering Department in Hong Kong shared, our Hong Kong climate adaptation measures are actually really useful or setting examples to the world, such as the recent flooding, the deadly flood in Spain. Actually, with those measures in Hong Kong, we can actually share with the world that we can, from drainage point of view or water management point of view and infrastructure point of view, we can actually increase our adaptation and mitigation ability. And so coming to the mitigation point of view, there are questions about how to the infrastructure resilience and urban agriculture adaptation strategy could happen. May I pass that to David for you to answer?
Sure, yes. I think there's a question about how we can integrate urban development and agriculture successfully in the context of climate adaptation and resilience. I think we have a couple of good examples from Hong Kong, both in the northern part of Hong Kong, where there's a lot of new development here, synergizing with the Shenzhen just across the border in China. And here we've, as part of a new town development, we've retained some of the existing agricultural land as part of Long Valley Nature Park, which is a new 40-hectare park, which sits right within the middle of a new urban development. And what's been interesting about the park is that it's not only maintaining and providing agricultural produce, but it's also been managed to enhance its value to wildlife, as well as providing a floodable space that's going to help overall climate resilience for the overall development. So managing those open spaces and agricultural areas to maintain production but also provide multiple benefits is very, very important as land becomes more valuable and space becomes a premium as cities develop and expand. As well as that, within the northern metropolis, we are looking at some initiatives to introduce higher productivity agriculture into the urban context. Where we can use high production methods within the built environment to really provide substantial inputs of food for the communities as well. So there's a couple of strands that you can look at in terms of integrating agricultural and rural agricultural and urban landscapes in this kind of climate resilience context.
Thank you, David. And also apart from Long Valley example, we also have eco shoreline example, just like Professor Kenny Learn shared in the first week about eco-engineering product, how it can help dissipate wave energy and also provide smooth surface, or how to combat the typhoon and sort of climate severe weather impact. And I know, Crystal, in the last IAIA, you shared about eco shoreline. Can you talk about that with us and how examples in Hong Kong can share with the world?
Yeah, actually, I get the idea from David Galata's previous talk about nature-based solution. This is actually a big-scale development in Dongchong area. After the reclamation, actually the new artificial coastline is built, as they want to conserve biodiversity. So they are trying to build the artificial shoreline more eco-friendly. They include 3 types of shorelines, such as mangrove shoreline, vertical shoreline, and rocky shoreline. So they are trying to imitate the nature, natural environment. So they actually have a very good result. Like they found that the species richness and abundance are actually showing a good sign.
Thanks, Crystal, and also David for the credit. So when it comes to solutions and adaptation and mitigation, we received a floor participant asking the difference between adaptation and mitigation. May I invite Professor Yoon to answer this question, please?
Sure. So both are very important. If you see the just past COP29, both mitigation and adaptation are very important. Usually when we have these two terms, in this context, mitigation versus adaptation, mitigation usually means how can we reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. And adaptation means we have climate risks and how we can adapt to this one. So how can we change our cities, make sure our cities can still be fine, can still be resilient, even though that we have a warming planet, we have this 1.5 degrees C or 2 degrees C warmer planet. And so in that occasions, we still be able to reduce the damages that are caused on this onto us. So that's mainly about adaptation. So you can see that mitigation is very important. So we have been talking about mitigation for about 2 decades. And so nowadays we know that even though that we have been trying to do more on mitigation, climate change happening now is real. So this is why we're saying that we still have to do more on adaptation. We have to do both together, not just the one-sided.
Can you still hear us, Yoon?
We can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Okay, no worry. I think we are having some technical problem of the visual here, but because we have a question from the floor, actually echoing what Professor Yoon just mentioned. You've said the difference between adaptation and mitigation, and also some examples. And our participant is asking, are there any examples or noticeable or successful cases between Hong Kong and other cities around the world in green innovation and building resilience? I guess it's one of the adaptation Professor Yoon just mentioned. Could you think of some example, Professor Yoon and Crystal? Can you hear us?
Yes, but it's a lot of noise.
Sorry. The question, let me repeat, sorry. The question was, are there any examples of successful cases or collaboration cases between Hong Kong and other cities around the world in green innovation and building resilience?
So I guess so in the past 5 weeks, if you listen to the 5 weeks presentations, 10 great presentations that we covered, soon as you see that a lot of cases there in Hong Kong, of course, we have done a lot of innovations. So like how we manage our water resources, too much water and too little water. We have typhoons, so we have this early warning systems. So if you see that this innovation will not be defined only in a technical way. For example, so the early warning system is also about institutions. So you have this one, you have this technical capability, but then another one is how you can put it into use. So this one, if you see that Hong Kong's early warning systems have been copied by many different places, especially across the border in mainland China, we have been using these systems. So to make sure that whenever you have this, the cities, we have the climate disaster, big typhoon coming, you can substantially reduce the damages, especially on mortalities on people's lives. And also for other technical issues, we have this, so as mentioned about this eco shoreline, about how we protect our coastal lines, so how we make sure that our cities are more resilient, how we do urban planning. So these, a lot of these innovations from the technology perspective, from energy, from urban planning perspective, from institutional perspectives, have been also adopted in other places as well beyond Hong Kong. So have been proven to be valid, to be useful in real cases, how we can adapt to climate risks and make sure that our cities are resilient. Kathy, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry. So thank you, Professor Yun, for your sharing between the mainland collaboration and Hong Kong, which is very, very valuable and also setting a great example. And I think we will definitely have more when our regional collaboration enhance, and also especially when the climate issue and also the carbon neutrality topic is putting the deadlines is getting closer. Speaking of the green collaboration examples, do David or Crystal or Yo-Yo have any examples to share?
I think we have a number of good examples in Hong Kong in terms of how we're managing climate resilient infrastructure as well as nature-based solutions in a very collaborative way.
Yep.
The Long Valley Nature Park, which I mentioned earlier, is a great example of a collaboration between the public sector, who were the proponents of the project and overall in charge of this, but also the private sector in terms of the consultants who help with the design, as well as local agricultural associations and villages, as well as the NGO sector as well, who are providing a lot of input in terms of management. So those types of projects, I think, are managed quite well in terms of bringing together different stakeholders to help achieve multiple positive outcomes for the project. We're also seeing good collaboration between business and the government as well now in terms of nature-based solutions, which has partly been driven by the new TNFD standards, which are gradually picking up impetus in Hong Kong, and we think here in Hong Kong is probably more so than in the surrounding areas in Asia. There's a lot of companies now who are taking TNFD and other reporting frameworks of biodiversity very seriously, which is helping to drive their nature-based solution programs, but working very closely hand in hand with government on these programs to make sure that they are aligned with the biodiversity planning that the government's currently engaged in.
Thank you. And thank you, David, for sharing more collaboration options. And when you speak of stakeholders, actually, we got a question here about public participation. How can we actually ensure or maximize public participation on climate change strategies? And how much can we, how can these public participation actually help in our goal of climate adaptation? Can I invite Yo-Yo to share with us any projects or any from a young professional point of view, how do you want to be engaged as a young professional or a public or a younger generation of, because you'll be experiencing more and more climate crisis apart from the 4 typhoons in 1 month in November in Hong Kong, or the heavy rainstorm, flooding everywhere apart from Hong Kong and all over the world. So how can young generation or public can be engaged to tackle these problems?
I think as a young professional, for myself, I really like to have my my voice heard. So I think for myself, I really like to like enjoy. If I have the chance, I really like to like engage in those kind of like youth development commission. I think in Hong Kong we have such kind of like program that designed to the youth that which the young professional or just youth who are interested in certain topics like and no matter in environment or like environmental protection or conservation or even like carbon neutrality. I think the government has already like provided certain kind of channel for us to get into to be part of the policy advocate, I would say. Like by joining this kind of like groups or like discussion, I think it's really important for us young professionals to get in touch with more experienced people. And when we are when we are being in the same group with them, we're actually learning from them. So I think it's really important to let young people to get into more like policy making or into like developing any kinds of like blueprint or roadmaps, because I think it is like it often happens like young people and more experienced people having very different kind of view into the topics, because we always have some fresh perspective on things. So I think it's really important for young people to be able to join this kind of like community or this kind of channel to at least have our voice maybe heard, to maybe to provide a new kind of like viewpoint to certain topics. So I think it's really important for us to have a channel to do that.
Apart from like physical channel, I'm sure like nowadays like online channels or like this type of webinars or social medias, we can actually share like more, we can hear more or younger voices on these. What about Crystal, also as a young professional and young member of the society?
I think as a public, I would usually get the information from TVs, but nowadays we have actually, I know that for EPD, something like that, they actually have a lot of Facebook pages, Instagram accounts. Actually, even though if we think that we are so small, maybe our voice are little, we can actually try to voice out using those social media channels, like just text what you want to say, and then maybe they will hurt you someday.
Yeah, and also apart from the government, I think in Hong Kong there are a lot of NGOs as well. Like they are putting up campaigns on climate change, especially those engaging the younger generation. And what about Professor Yoon? And in your opinion, as a professor of the university, how do you engage your students, or how does your university, the Chinese university, engage the public on these climate adaptation resolving or solutions?
Well, we think that the communication is very important, especially the two-way communication. It's not just one way, and we teach you listen. It's not like this. So as we try to have this kind of opportunities to share knowledge that we have learned from others, and we share this knowledge to others. And so it's a network. So then we can have this two-way communication, the sharing of knowledge and good practices among different people. And it's because we are in university, gives us a great opportunity actually to convey these messages through students, learn from our students, and also we can organize students together with the civil society to work together on this. And also we can, not just the students, not just the general public, we can also become a bridge across all of these different stakeholders. So the professionals, the civil society, the general public, the government, policymakers, so the local policymakers and international policymakers, and so we can also bring all of these channels together. So this is our unique strength, I guess, to help the entire world, to come together, share our lessons, share our insights, share good stories, and also share our tragedies, and so how we can improve from this current status. So in this way, so as a university professor, this is what we can contribute to the society, to local communities, and also to the international communities.
Thank you, Professor Yun. I think you're right, the bridge and two-way engagement as the key point that we, key takeaway for us, because we're not only talking about young or less young, or we're not, or more experienced, yes, or public or private. We are talking about global issues, not just Hong Kong, not only megacity, not only regional, but it's like a global issue we're all together facing. So the engagement direction for our climate adaptation as a whole should be information sharing and also bridging all the young or experienced or public, private, all together to sit here or sit together to find a solution for the world together. And speaking of this, we've just passed the COP29, and with a central focus on climate finance, actually it brought together over 200 countries in Baku and to reach a breakthrough agreement with a central focus on climate finance, and also they will provide a subsidy of the goal of USD 100 billion annually to increasing the fund to 300 by 2035. And in order to ensure climate development, sustainable development, and climate adaptation for the world, as we mentioned, how do you think as megacities can join hand in hand, like Hong Kong, to tackle this global trend with the COP outcome, climate finance, for instance? Like how can we actually join together to help? Can I invite David?
I think one thing we've touched on partnerships. I think this is a key thing, not only from the COP29, but also COP16, which was before, where COP16 in particular identified a $200 billion requirement, annual requirement for nature recovery, which at the moment I think funding is available. Same for adaptation and mitigation. I feel that there's a much bigger role that the private sector needs to play in this. This all cannot come from governments. And cities such as Hong Kong, I think we have an advantage in that we are primarily a financial center. And I think there's opportunities for us to work more closely with finance to understand what options are available that are going to be win-win. And this is not just funding projects or funding programs that are essential in terms of climate mitigation and adaptation, but are also going to generate revenue. And we need to be working hand in hand with these sectors to understand what types of projects are going to deliver those types of services for them. And we're currently working on models that are going to do just this. So I think it's something with our proximity of all the environmental experts that we have in Hong Kong with the financial sector, we need to work on these types of solutions.
Yeah, definitely. Because I also very agree on like what they think. I think it's really important to engage the private finance side to financing, no matter in climate adaptation project or climate mitigation project. Because as what David has just said, actually there is currently a huge finance gap in financing, putting money into the project that we are doing good for the environment. And having said that, we really need support from the private investment side to put their money to invest in this kind of project in one way which would help them hopefully to generate revenue, but on the other side which also do the goods on the social side and the environmental side. So I think it's really important for the government maybe to establish certain kinds of framework for people to like understand how to evaluate the ecological benefit they get from that project. Because I think the biggest problem, the biggest barrier we're facing in like and financing this kind of climate project is because things are not cannot be translated back in more
monetary
terms. So I think it would be hard to attract financing in this kind of project. So in addition, I think it's really important for us to have more innovative financing measure, such as what I've been looking recently is like in insurance, like because for project proponent, no matter the government or the private side, they really like, because climate project is always very risky, and having a third party to no matter to provide some kind of safety level for the project would really help to boost the willingness for the people, for the private finance side to invest in this kind of project. So I think for no matter in Hong Kong or globally, it's really important for us to have more innovative financial measurement to help us to be able to contribute to boost up the thing that we can do for a climate project.
Exactly. And actually, climate crisis itself is very risky.
Yes.
Of course, you mentioned the projects are also risky, but actually the investment, we can actually make them into like in terms of finance, so financial products, or financialize them into projects. We can actually benefit from them. We can minimize a lot of risks.
Yeah.
Oh, we have Casey now. And hey, and talking about how to integrate in a smarter way. We have a question on how to make, what are the cost-effective climate smart solutions? Casey, do you have any insight for that?
You mean cost-effective?
And also smart climate solutions.
To be honest, I don't have any ready solution. We all have to contribute, I think. But cost effectiveness, I think, if we consider that from a longer term perspective, we have to do it. The benefits will come later.
And what about, so we are all like, talk about smart solutions. Since we are heading towards an AI era, we are heading into are all like without maybe just, we have mega brains for us to think of solutions. So we have an audience asked about how can AI help build an assertive data to tackle climate change? I want to pass to our young generation, Crystal, to have a thought on this.
Well, actually, I'm very new to AI. I think, first of all, talking about data, usually after we do experiments, we conduct trials, we have a lot of data collected and then recorded. But then it is a very hassling work to do the analysis. If we can make good use of the AI and then let AI to help us do the data analysis, maybe we can get a lot more faster result and then have a faster presentation of the results, so such that we know if a certain solution, if it's work or not.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to supplement what Crystal had just said. I remember from one presentation by Mr. Armstrong Zhang from the Hong Kong Observatory, he actually mentioned that our Hong Kong Observatory has already used AI to do the weather modeling, and I think it's really, as just what Chris said, it is one of the most effective, or use technology to help us to get faster prediction of the weather. And I think AI will definitely help in data analysis and also to help us to get may not be very accurate, but at least a faster prediction that to help to warn people, especially under those kind of extreme weather events like typhoons and all those kind of like heavy rains, flooding. So I think AI would definitely help and help us to get a faster data analysis and prediction to help us to warn people that there might be something coming up. So just be careful of that. Yeah.
So apart from like alerting us like earlier or forecasting those extreme events, what about like could actually AI help tackle like apart from prevention? David, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think AI, we're all still exploring the potential for AI to help us with our work. Perhaps where, in terms of resilience, where it's going to be useful is that as we've seen through this series of webinars, there's a huge potential range of options that can be adopted for providing and increasing resilience under different scenarios. And determining which of those is going to be most cost effective in a particular set of circumstances is a very, very complicated and time consuming process. So AI is perfectly suited to help you guide your way through that process and speed up the analysis of different options and iterations to determine what's going to be the best solution for any particular circumstance that we have.
Yeah, I think this actually answered the earlier question on cost effectiveness and smart solution on climate change. Of course, we need our brain, our human brains, and our professional brains to think of the solutions. But with the help of AI, we can actually save a lot of time, and also we might be able to explore some alternatives that we have never thought that would work. What about Professor Yoon? What's your thought on AI?
Casey.
Oh, Casey wants to supplement. Yes, Casey, please.
Well, on the issue of climate change, we have to deal with lots of data and information. This is where AI can help to make sense out of the data that we have in hand, and also to learn from the others, either success or failure. Now, on the issue of smart sensors, I wish to say something too. Sensor would give us a lot of data, but we really have to design the sensors in such a way that they can serve the purpose. We have to have our objectives clear, not just to put some sensors out and to collect tons and tons of data. So they must be target specific.
Well, I really agree, because when we use AI a lot these days. AI in the AI age, well, we are collecting a much bigger data set. So big data is big deal for us. So you can use AI to help us to collect all types of data, sensors, satellite images, and also individualized data as well. So then you can process data in a much more efficient way. And it's actually much cheaper from one aspect than humans to process the data. So from that perspective, you can when you think about climate adaptation, all the climate risks in the past, so we can only do things like so for this city, for this place, so what is the risk? But these days we can actually make the climate risk analysis more pertinent to individuals. We can make sure that, for example, individuals, you live in different communities, you have, for example, your household at a certain has certain features, and as an individual have a different age, different gender. Everybody can be different. So that with AI, with all this very efficient data, with a lot of data, and with all the data analysis, we can have a possibility to make sure that our adaptation measures, and also in the future also mitigation measures as well, we can try our best to disclose all of these potential opportunities to make improvements, to make sure that the knowledge is individualized and the applications also individualized in that sense. So artificial intelligence can have a great potential. And for professionals, as professors, we're trying to make sure that our students will catch up with the era. So they must use artificial intelligence these days to make sure that they are more powerful than previous generations. So in this way, they will not be replaced by artificial intelligence in the future professional market, but with the assistance from AI, they will be much better, so much more efficient in doing analysis, in helping different communities, different individuals to make sure that we can better adapt to climate risks and reduce all the damages due to climate disasters, these impacts, and also we can also exhaust all the potential opportunities for mitigating our emissions. So AI has a great potential, and we are also trying to make sure that our students and also they can quickly adapt to this new era of artificial intelligence.
Professor Yun, you've made a good point. We're not replaced by AI yet, and we will not be, because we are just like, of course, like in Hong Kong, for example, just like Yo-Yo said, the Hong Kong Observatory has already been using AI.
Barking up a storm.
But of course, we will still need the scientists and also us to be those who input the prompts and think of those solutions and how to utilize AI to better or more cost effectively or doing it smarter. And coming to this, there are two quite similar questions. Talk about how do we get people involved in climate projects and how to convince politicians to do the right thing with regards to climate change. Can I invite Casey to speak first?
Getting people to involve in climate projects, I think firstly we start with sensitization. They should be sensitized to the issue, to be aware of the issues and problems that we are facing. And then education. At the same time, we have to provide the solutions. Okay, at least what solutions are there? They will have to make the choice. Getting politicians involved is a bit more tricky, I think. Tricky in the sense that they are all aware of the issues and problems. It's only a matter of making the right decision. And not only just making the decision, but also to act on that. And I can see that there are lots of constraints and problems, issues, etc. So as members of the public, somehow we have to let them know that those are difficult decisions, yet decisions that they have to take. Otherwise, the future generations will suffer. Anyhow, there is a price to be paid.
Exactly, and I think the awareness part by the recent severe weather events or severe climate events, I think the public and also politicians would be well aware of it. And also from the educational sector, we have been studying, or like we're well informed, but it's the action that they're taking. Especially under, there's also a question relating to these two questions just now. It's about the economic environment, like under a difficult economic environment or like discrepancy in the socio-economic status, how can actually climate change be people's priority, be our society's priority? Do you have any thought?
How can it be a priority? I think reiterating some of the comments from Professor Xu and Casey earlier, obviously education is the key to this, in terms of making or letting people understand what a critical issue this is, to kind of garner their support for this and to put this front and center in everyone's minds, that this is perhaps the biggest issue facing us today. So this is probably the key point.
What about from the younger generation or young professional point of view? Yo-Yo and Crystal, what do you think? Like, for me, for asking politicians, like for example in Hong Kong, actually, just like as Secretary for the Environment and Ecology mentioned, we have been putting priority for achieving carbon neutrality in 2050. But of course, from here to 2050, there are still like 25 years ahead. Of course, there are policies with pushing forward for tackling climate crisis, from pushing forward electric vehicles, also power or more renewable energy. We're testing new energy transports such as hydrogen. But apart from all these, like from a young generation point of view, how can we actually get, like, apart from like a top-down policy point of view, like get people involved or get private sector involved under this like economic circumstances?
Yeah, I think Kathy really mentioned really one good point. Like, apart from like the top-down approach that we're dealing with climate policy or climate adaptation mitigation, I think you mentioned one thing was like many of these goals are very long term, like 2035, 2050, 2060, or for some other countries. I think it's also really important to look at from a bottom-up kind of approach to see a more short-term effects that we're facing. I remember from the presentation by Professor Lim Chiu-Ying on the heat stress that one. Yeah. He mentioned that actually some kind of like underprivileged people in Hong Kong who are living in like those kind of subdivided units are facing like serious problem on the hot nights, like which over 35 degrees, I think. Yeah, very, very hot. So I think it's also important for a politician or like people who try to get a helping hand in this kind of climate policy to really look from their point of view, like from a bottom-up approach, to see what actually they can really support them or help them in the short term, but not just in the long term, because they are already facing a lot of like problems caused by this kind of climate change or climate. We can even put it in a way like climate inequalities is the problem that they're facing. So I think it's really important for a politician or for the government to also see from the bottom-up kind of view to try to provide solution to kind of like balance both the short-term and long-term and the climate change policy kind of.
Yeah. Thanks, Yurio, for raising the vulnerable group, like more vulnerable group. I guess from Hong Kong city like point of view, there are vulnerable groups like we have to take care of, and at a global level, we have more vulnerable countries or vulnerable cities, or those more like more exposed to climate impact. So here comes a question on how can climate adaptation strategies be designed to ensure equitable access to resources and support for vulnerable populations or vulnerable communities. Do you have some thoughts, Professor Yoon and Professor Casey Lam?
So probably I can contribute a little bit on this. Well, if you see that the COP29, the $300 billion is one of the mechanisms to make sure that we have some resources, at least for those poorer countries, to have access to these kind of resources. And if you look at, for example, all the damages caused by climate change across countries, and you'll see a very good correlation between how much damage people receive and how much wealth people have. Usually, the richer you are, the less damage a same climate disaster will have in your city. If you're a poor city, then you tend to have much greater disaster. The same, for example, the same typhoon can cause totally different damages across different cities at different income levels. So this is one very important explanation. So why the different areas of wealth in that way, it does matter how much resource you have, does matter in terms of how you address climate change, how you adapt to this climate disasters. And in this one, so $300 billion one is just the starting point. So we have this, have these resources there, but I see that the equity and equality, they're all very important questions. So we see this great diversity across global cities, and even within cities, within the same city, you see a huge difference. So in this series, we also see that in Hong Kong is relatively wealthy city, but we do have a lot of vulnerable groups as well in the city, and you can see that so across globe within and also across the same city, you see huge differences. And so, but to make sure that people have the equal access to resources, and is a big challenge, and how we can make sure that within this the means, they can have the capacity to deal with these disasters. So one thing, of course, to make sure that resources are there for them to use. But another one also what is very important is how you can make sure that you can use the available resources well, to make sure that you can minimize the damages. For example, the $300 billion is, the amount is very important, and probably is not adequate at all to address all the climate risks, especially in poor countries. And another aspect is how you can make sure that you can use the money, use the resources in a good way. So in that sense, is how you can make sure that those people, those communities that in the greatest needs can access the resources, can also, for example, make sure that the money is used in a correct way to maximize the protection against all these climate disasters. And also all of these are very important questions. We have huge challenges ahead of us. How we can deal with this, and if we see that climate change already is happening, but future climate change, future climate disasters will be more violent and will be more prevalent. So we have a big challenge ahead of us actually, to how we can make sure that we have the resources there. We can only see that we should make continuous improvement from the current status. It's very difficult to make sure that we can jump to the perfect situation now. So we have to really make the incremental improvement step by step.
You, Professor Yunnan, you mentioned a really good point. I saw Casey want to supplement about the equal access to resources, right?
Right. I think Professor Xu has put it very well. I only just wish to add that it's quite true that the vulnerable countries suffer a lot these days, but we live in a small world. We will suffer too. There will be rippling effects affecting us too. So I think we face the same fate, and that's why we all have to contribute.
And speaking to this, a follow-up question to this question is, are there any or some successful examples, for example, from Hong Kong point of view, any inclusive, sustainable effort that balance economic growth and climate resilience for low-income communities or like more vulnerable communities? David, do you have any examples?
I think a lot of the public housing in Hong Kong is provided by the Housing Authority. It's a public institution, and they are very forward-thinking in terms of how they can introduce green building and sustainability and resiliency into the programs that they're developing. And in Hong Kong, we have a very high population density, so these public housing units are high density, high-rise blocks. So the Housing Authority have been looking at all different kinds of measures that they can help improve resilience to those types of buildings. Just one small example that I was involved in was looking at using a sponge city or blue-green infrastructure to help manage stormwater in those types of buildings. So this has multiple benefits, as do all the best nature-based solutions in terms of helping to alleviate flood risk, but also that rainwater can be collected and cleaned and stored and then reused for normative purposes. So I think for that one pilot project that we worked on a while ago, they managed to reduce their irrigation demand by 50% just by collecting and cleaning the rainwater. So these types of programs by government, I think, have been very useful for improving the climate resiliency for those people.
Yeah, exactly. Like in other countries actually can make reference to this. For example, like last month in Chiang Mai, I remember in Thailand, it's like a lot of flooding for poor people because and their flooding it's like severely destroyed the whole city. And if our example from Hong Kong can be shared with the world, and it's not actually a very great investment or thing.
No.
Yeah, it's like just the idea, and it's actually quite cost effective, the green solutions. So I think if we can all share this knowledge, just like Professor Xu said, it's like very imminent. It's like getting more severe and more severe. And then if we can share that knowledge to join together to hand in hand to tackle these problems, I guess we can actually help ourselves, help and also different vulnerable communities.
Yeah, and speaking of like, apart from like a project to flood risk, I also have one example, which is a private investment in, I think it's in Hawaii, which is a bamboo reforestation project, which I presented in last year IAIA. And this project is kind of like a nature-based solution project, which actually the private investor, asked help from the local communities in Hawaii to help them to plant some bamboo there, because most of the farmland there in Hawaii, which is kind of like a rural area in Hong Kong, is like people already stopped farming, so most of the farmlands have been abandoned, and so there is some situation like soil erosion and stuff, and Hawaii is like a very low tide environment, so once it has heavy rain, it usually gets flooded. But once this nature-based solution project get kickstarted, when people plant some bamboo there, on one hand, actually the bamboo they plant can be used to manufacture some kind of like bamboo utensils, because in Hong Kong we just ban plastic utensils. And like on one hand, it can be economically feasible to do so. On the other hand, it also engage the local communities in helping the local area, the local environments to get to be more climate resilient. So I think this example really set up a good case for people to understand that actually nature-based solution hasn't been like don't have to be really like a fancy or very magnificent kind of thing. Similar to climate adaptation, climate mitigation kind of project, they don't have to be huge, but as long as they are making an impact, I think it will be really useful to balance the environmental, social, and also the climate resilient kind of thing. Yeah, so I think it's like really good to share about it.
Yeah, thank you, Yo-Yo, for sharing this local example. Havana is like at the western side of Hong Kong in a more rural area, less than urban area in Hong Kong. And before we close, actually we've covered a lot of why we are doing this and why we are talking about climate adaptation, and what our speakers have covered in the past 5 weeks, and also the ideas of how we can join hand in hand or build a bridge to share this knowledge at this platform for young or experienced, private or public, and also regional, local, global, to share with us. So before we close, would Professor Casey Lam or Professor Xu have anything to add to our discussion?
Just a few words. Now, the conference that we have just had is COP29. That is, we have been talking about that for 29 years and still searching for a solution that reflects the indifference and also the indecisiveness of the politicians. Of course, there is a cost of every action, but the cost will be even greater if we do not act. So I think we really have to convince whoever takes the decision to stop being economically defensive and to be ecologically responsible for this generation and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Casey Lam. You've actually made a really impressive and a very conclusive remark for this evening. And I think here we're hopeful, although after 29 years, we're still working hard, but I think we are not in zero progress. We are on the way towards 2050, right? We are on the way, and with AI's help and with our young generation's help, with our professional, and also with this platform, we share Hong Kong's experience and Hong Kong's good examples with the world. And we also absorb our global knowledge to share with all our professionals in Hong Kong. And thank you all the panelists tonight, especially Professor Lam, Professor Xu, Dr. David Gallagher, Yo-Yo, and Christo tonight. We had a great, fruitful discussion. And we hope to see you in IAIA 25 in Italy. And may I now pass back the time to Keisha and maybe Wes for the concluding remarks.
Thank you to all of our presenters and panelists for a great discussion, but let's continue the discussion. If you are an IAIA member, feel free to post something into the Hub, our online community, and even if you are not an IAIA member but have social media and would like to share something there, again, our handle is at IAIA Network, and a hashtag you could use is hashtag IAIA Webinar. Now, as you leave here today, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey, and there's a variety of questions there that help us ensure that we're doing the best we can on our webinars and improve. But there's also a question that asks you to suggest future webinar topics. So if you have something that you'd like to hear, please let me know, and I will do my best to organize presenters that can get you that information. So a final thank you to all of the participants who joined us today. We know that your time is valuable, and we are so thankful that you chose to spend it with us today. Just a reminder, as you leave here, a recording will be sent to you via email within a day or two of this live broadcast. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly at keisha@iaia.org. So until next time, thank you for joining us.